Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks very much for joining. The presentation will begin shortly, and if you have any questions, please use the question and answers box at the bottom of the screen to type them in. Please don't raise your hand, and we'll answer as many questions as possible after the presentation. So my name is Vincent Fonamava. I manage the Cheetah Metapopulation project on behalf of the Endangered Wildlife Trust. And before we get kicked off, it's important to thank our donors. So a very big thank you to PwC, the primary sponsor of the project, National Geographic, Ceramed, Ford Wildlife Foundation for the vehicle that they've given our project, and as well as some individual donors, Gay Ferguson, the Tandy Grant Foundation. Thanks very much for making this work possible. So to understand what's happened to cheetahs, we have to go right back to the beginning, 13,000 years ago, when agriculture first started. So before humans started practicing agriculture, cheetah were found right across Africa, except for the more forested regions, right across the Middle East, all the way into Russia, all the way eastwards to India and even Bangladesh. And in the past 13,000 years, the resident range of cheetah has decreased by 94%. So since we started agriculture 13,000 years ago, there were only 10 million humans on the planet then. So while our numbers have gone up 700 times, cheetah habitat has decreased by 94%. And obviously, this decline has been due to human factors, that is habitat loss, mainly habitat loss, and retaliatory killings due to livestock depredation. So cheetahs, of course, kill sheep, goats, and sometimes they take young cattle. And it's very interesting to see the differing levels of human influence in the four geopolitical regions. So obviously cheetah occurred historically in the Middle East. They occurred in West Africa, East Africa, and Southern Africa. And if we focus in on the Asia and North Africa, that includes the Fertile Crescent. So this is where the 8 founder crops were domesticated, the first crops domesticated by humans: wheat, barley, peas. It's also the site of domestication of 4 of the major 5 domestic animals: cattle, sheep, goats, and pigs, all domesticated in this part of the world. And as a result, this is where human populations first started increasing. If you look at in the 1400s, there were already 120 million people living in North Africa and the Middle East, way before human populations started to increase in Africa. And as a result, this is where we see the first major destruction of wild cheetah populations, to the extent that there's only 40 cheetah left in this entire geopolitical region. The last cheetahs seen in the Soviet Union in the 70s, the last cheetahs in India in the 50s, the last cheetahs in Morocco in the 70s, the last cheetahs in Egypt only disappearing recently in 2014. So there's only 40 cheetah left here. And if you look at data collected by the Iranian Cheetah Society over the last 20 years, 80% of cheetah deaths recorded in Iran are due to human-related factors. So there's very little opportunity for population growth when you're losing 80% of your individuals to human-related factors. It's very interesting also, this footage that we got from the Iranian Cheetah Society. Very interesting footage. You can see camels, which is not a naturally occurring animal in the deserts of Iran. It's a livestock animal wandering around in their national parks, out competing other animals from obtaining access to water. So yeah, it's if we now move on to West Africa, this is the first place in Africa where we see agriculture starting, where crops were domesticated independently 7,000 years ago in West Africa. Sorghum, millet, African rice, yam, all domesticated there in Nigeria, Cameroon, that part of West Africa. And the full suite of Middle Eastern domestic animals arrived in this region by 4,000 years ago. And that's why if you look at the human densities on the continent of Africa, they are highest in West Africa. 150 million people in Nigeria, for example. So, it's very, very difficult to conserve a wide-ranging species like the cheetah in an environment like that. And as a result, there's only 250 cheetahs left in West Africa in 4 fragmented populations. And about 2,500 years ago, because human pressures human populations were increasing in West Africa, we start to see African farmers moving eastwards and southwards, bringing their crops and their cattle with them, and hitting East Africa about, I think it was about 2,500 years ago, and Southern Africa about 1,500 years ago. And in the process, they started to destroy cheetah habitat in these areas. In East Africa, cheetah have been eradicated from 92% of their historical range. There's about 2,000 cheetahs left in 15 subpopulations. And then Southern Africa, only really hit by farmers 1,500 years ago. So we still have the largest wild cheetah populations. About 4,500 cheetahs surviving in 61 subpopulations in Southern Africa. Interestingly, 76% of these cheetahs still actually occur outside of protected areas. So Southern Africa really is the conservation stronghold for cheetah. And it's quite interesting that if you look at South Africa, cheetah were really hit hard during the colonial period in South Africa. The colonials arriving in the Cape, and as they moved northwards, they slowly extirpated cheetah populations. And we know this from bounty records that were paid out by the Cape colonial government for the destruction of 1,800 leopard, 1,100 cheetah. And, because of the very many different names for the animals during those times, we don't know what 1,100 of those bounties were, because, cheetah was still referred to as tiger or tier back then. Sorry, leopards were referred to as tiger or tier, and cheetah were referred to as luiperd, and then later vlakte luiperd, and then later jachtluiperd. So it's very difficult to determine exactly what all these bounties were for. But so you can very easily see from the numbers that, there was varying degrees of human pressure on the cheetah populations in these four geopolitical regions. 13,000 years of agriculture in the Middle East, there's only 40 cheetah left, and 1,500 years of agriculture in Southern Africa, and we still have 4,500 cheetah. So it's very easy to understand what's happened to cheetah populations in the last 13,000 years. The bad news, unfortunately, is that human populations will be, continue to grow, and they're projected to double in all 4 of the geopolitical regions over the next 80 years, which is pretty scary. So if you look at South Africa, you can see the colonials arriving in the Cape in the 1800s. As they moved northwards, they brought with them horses and guns. And this was bad news for cheetahs. Cheetahs can run very fast, but they can't run very far. So they easily chased down with horses. The last cheetah in the Western Cape, the last cheetah in the Eastern Cape, 1888, was killed near Grahamstown. The last cheetahs in Zululand, 1930. And by the 1960s, we only had 400 cheetah left in South Africa in 2 populations, Kruger Park and the Kalahari Gemsbok National Park. But in a wonderful twist of events, democracy came to South Africa in 1994, and the number of cheetah reserves increased from 10 to over 50 cheetah reserves today. So this is because these tourists came to South Africa and they wanted to see our charismatic large mammals, and cheetah were then reintroduced into a number of reserves in all 9 provinces of the country. And in an interesting twist, at the same time, a lot of farmers, livestock farmers, switched from sheep and goats and cattle to wildlife. And of course, cheetah don't take cattle. Cattle are too big for cheetah. They definitely do take wildlife. And so cheetah moved into places where we hadn't seen them for 30, 40, 50 years. And this was a wonderful development. But of course, these game ranchers didn't want these cheetah there because the wildlife now had financial value. So in the process, we assisted these farmers with the capture of 157 wild cheetahs off our farmland. And these farmers were compensated 10,000 Rand per cheetah. And these cheetahs were then relocated to 41 reserves located across the country. And since we established this metapopulation of cheetahs, our population has grown from 217 cheetah on these reserves, these 41 reserves, to it's actually over 400 cheetah today on 60 reserves across South Africa. So what is a metapopulation? It's a whole lot of populations that are connected through human-mediated dispersal. So I basically move cheetah between the reserves to prevent inbreeding and to ensure population stability, to prevent overpopulation and underpopulation. So in any metapopulation, you'll have some reserves where the cheetah are doing very well, like Pilanesberg, and then you'll have other reserves where they are struggling. For example, in Zululand, some of our reserves are struggling at the moment. And then in some reserves, they've gone extinct temporarily, like Ritvlei, for example, where there's no cheetah at the moment. But overall, the general health of the metapopulation remains healthy because you always have those source populations. So it's interesting if you look at cheetah numbers in other countries around the world, everywhere else they're on the decline. Throughout West Africa and Asia and North Africa, East Africa, they're on the decline. It really is only South Africa and actually Malawi where cheetah numbers are increasing. And the reason for this is because we fence our reserves in South Africa. So we've come to terms with the fact that, you know, livestock farmers do not coexist well with cheetahs. And the best way to deal with this is to effectively separate them, to prevent the livestock farmers coming into the protected areas and to prevent the cheetahs coming into their agricultural areas. So, and this has been effective. The thing with fencing is that it allows your reserve to maximize its conservation contribution by holding cheetah populations at much closer to their estimated carrying capacity. So, for example, if you look at the largest cheetah populations in the world, Kruger Park is the only one that's fenced. So this means that the edge effects of humans on the edges of these reserves are no longer there, and you can hold a maximum, you know, a large, you can store, you know, probably what we would consider a maximum number of cheetah that can be supported by that area in that national park. The problem with fencing, unfortunately, is that it limits natural gene flow. So this is a problem for a species like the cheetah, which occurs at very low densities. So we need human management or a managed metapopulation strategy to deal with this inbreeding and overpopulation and underpopulation. We call it human-mediated gene flow. So whenever a reserve has too many cheetah, we move in there, we capture the surplus cheetah and we relocate them. Whenever we see there's an inbreeding threat on a reserve, we move in there, we take individuals off of that reserve and we bring in new genetics. And that's essentially the managed metapopulation. That's the work that we at the EWT do for cheetah conservation. And it's very interesting, you know, doing this work, we've realized how adaptable the cheetah is as a species. It can adapt to varying climates, varying prey densities. Some of our reserves have very high prey densities, and some of them have very low prey densities. Some have very high densities of lion, leopard, and hyena, and some have lower densities of competing predators. But it's very interesting that, you know, we move these cheetah between Kalahari reserves, Thicket reserves in the Eastern Cape, Karoo reserves where it can snow in winter, temperatures going up to -10, floodplain grassland reserves in Malawi where temperatures can go up to 45. We have 16 Lowveld savanna reserves with very high densities of lion and leopard. We have 3 grassland reserves. We have many mountainous savanna reserves. You know, in many of our reserves, it's very interesting. You'll find cheetah up in the mountains where you'd least expect to see them, you know, ambushing kudus on cliffs. The cheetah really is an incredibly a remarkable and adaptable species. We even have 2 coastal dune forest reserves where cheetah survive and do relatively well. And what we've realized is that when we relocate cheetah between these reserves, you know, there's generally a 50% chance that that cheetah on the back of the vehicle or in the aircraft that we are relocating will survive at least 2 years post-release. And, you know, the only significant difference observed is when we relocate cheetah into the Karoo. And the Karoo is, of course, a very difficult place to be a cheetah. Low prey densities, you have to walk very far to find something to eat. It's very rocky there, so it's quite difficult for cheetah to use that high speed that they have to catch their prey. And only 36% of non-Karoo cheetah survive when we put them in a Karoo environment. But when we take cheetah from the Karoo and we move them into the Lowveld, of course, it's, you know, it's like Christmas for them. There's prey all over the place. But unfortunately, with all that abundant prey comes all the abundant predators. So the competing predators, lion, leopard, and hyena, kill a lot of our cheetah. And we do these relocations because of the genetic rules. We know that from genetic evidence accumulated since the 1980s that you need at least 1,000 individuals for a genetically viable population. You know, the moment you go below this, you are going to lose fitness. And if we want to truly conserve cheetahs on evolution, you know, we want to be doing that on an evolutionary time scale. So we want cheetahs to be able to adapt, to have sufficient genetic diversity to adapt to the changes that climate change will bring. And we want them to have sufficient genetic diversity to adapt to whatever diseases they may encounter in future. And they will encounter these problems in future. And we also know from the human experience that inbreeding is a bad thing because, you know, basically, you know, by the 1800s, humans realized that marrying people that are related to you is problematic because, you know, we know from the European monarchies that some of the offspring that came out of these cousin marriages, and in some cases, even half sister, half brother marriages, that offspring that are produced are not fit. So by law, humans are not allowed to marry each other, related humans, and the same principle applies to a species like the cheetah. And we've had a lot of success with this metapopulation approach. We can see when we stopped removing cheetah from farmland in 2009, our population immediately decreased because you know, unfortunately, a lot of wild cheetah were being sold to captive facilities. And this was very problematic for our wild cheetah populations. But we worked with government and various permitting officials and conservation authorities to stop the loss of wild cheetah to captivity. And in 2012, our population started to increase. And just last week, we went past the 400 mark. So we've almost doubled our wild cheetah population in South Africa in the last, you know, in the metapopulation in the last 9 years. And we've also, using these surplus cheetah from our growing population, we've coordinated 19 reintroductions since 2012. The most exciting reintroduction was in 2017 when we moved beyond South African borders with the reintroduction of wild cheetah into Malawi. And they've done incredibly well in Malawi. We reintroduced 4 cheetah there in 2017, and we're already on 25 cheetah in Malawi today. So thanks to the assistance from African Parks, we've had a lot of success in Malawi. And yes, so we've basically turned things around for cheetah. Before we started this project, the captive cheetah population was stealing cheetahs from our fenced reserves. And our fenced reserves were taking cheetahs from the free roaming population. So we've switched that situation around now. And today we have captive facilities such as the Sheer, De Wild, the Hoedspruit Endangered Species Center, now contributing cheetahs. What kills cheetah on these fenced reserves that we work with? I see my internet connection is a little bit unstable. I hope that it's bounced back. Okay. Lion are the principal killers of cheetah. 31% of our cheetah mortalities are due to lion. Humans, despite the fences, we still lose 24% of our cheetah to human-related factors. And then 9% to leopards. Cheetah, of course, kill each other. They compete for females, and 8% of cheetah deaths are due to cheetahs killing other cheetahs. And then hyenas and a whole lot of other factors contribute to the deaths of mainly cubs. This is some very interesting footage to give you an idea of what happens when cheetahs bump into lion. You can see this female cheetah knows exactly what to do. The lion will kill her cubs, so she slowly moves towards the lion to lure them away from her cubs. You can see that her cubs in the background there, they also know what to do. They know that the lion means danger, so they run off, and then the mom will slowly lure the lions towards her and then pull them away in another direction. And it's very interesting. The next morning when we went to find that female cheetah, she was fine. All of her cubs were fine. So phenomenal.
Alright guys, just sit still, okay?
This is a very interesting interaction between a male leopard and two male cheetahs on Pilanesberg National Park.
Guys, sit
You
still.
can see the male leopard wants to steal their kill, but the two male cheetahs confronted him and blocked him from stealing their kill. Very, very interesting interaction. And this is what happened. You can see at the end of this video, it was very interesting to see the male leopard eventually running.
Oh, yes.
And, even though we lose 9% of our cheetah to leopards, in some cases they are able to stand their ground. This is an interesting footage of a leopard attacking a cheetah in Namibia. You can see the leopard tries to get a grip of the cheetah and to strangle it, but the cheetah managed to push it off and get away. This is a young cheetah cub on Pilanesberg that was unfortunately cornered by a leopard. You can see the cheetah cub running off. The leopard unfortunately captures the cheetah cub, and in a space of just 3 seconds, unfortunately breaks its neck and kills it. The cheetah mom came to defend its cub, but it didn't get there in time. Very interesting interaction here between brown hyena and cheetah. Brown hyena much smaller, but definitely not scared of cheetah, and chasing the two young sub-adult cheetah off of their kill and stealing their kill and running off with it. So you can see that cheetah definitely are at the bottom of the predator hierarchy. They're the weakest of the large predators. So very tough to be a cheetah out there. So yeah, also spotted hyena known to kill cheetahs, mainly cubs. Very rarely will you get them killing adult cheetah, but they definitely do run down and kill cheetah cubs. These are wild dogs. Very interesting. Wild dogs behave quite differently. They generally just pester the cheetah. They hardly ever directly attack the cheetah, but they just pester and pester and pester the cheetah until eventually the cheetah will give up and abort their kill, as you can see in this case. After about 15 minutes of pestering and pestering and pestering, they eventually chase the cheetah off of their kill. But that's very interesting what happens with a cheetah. If we look at cheetah on reserves where there's no other predators, it's very interesting that their numbers just blossom. It's this is Mountain Zebra National Park. We reintroduced 2 males and 2 females onto this reserve in 2007. And in the space of just 3 years, those 4 cheetah became 35 cheetah. So this was a reserve where there were no leopards, there were no lions, there weren't any brown hyena, no spotted hyena. And when these competing predators are not present, the cheetah numbers just boom. So you actually need those competing predators to regulate the cheetah numbers. So a major threat to our conservation efforts, you know, when we started this project in 2011 was the loss of wild cheetah to captivity. And we lost almost 50 cheetah to captivity, you know, in 2011 to 2013, mainly after the global financial crisis. And this is a major threat to cheetah. They're not dangerous to humans like leopard and lion are, and therefore they decide as pet animals. This is some very disturbing footage. Every year they reckon about 100 young cheetahs stolen from their mothers in wild conditions are smuggled from Ethiopia and Somalia into the Middle East, where they are used as pet animals by wealthy people living in that part of the world. And I went to Somalia about 2 years ago, and I witnessed one of these confiscations where the police confiscated some cubs from
2 of the cubs haven't made it. They haven't made the long journey.
You see these 2 cubs.
Let's go.
The smugglers don't know how to.
Are you going to be okay?
Yes, I'm going to be in okay. I'll be here.
I have a blanket there. You can sit on it.
No problem. I'm okay here. Yeah.
I can move this bag.
Okay, is the one in the front is okay?
There's 10 cheetah inside of those baskets. This little one was still alive.
Unbelievable. Okay. All right.
Unfortunately, he didn't make it. At the end of that, 2 days after we confiscated those cheetah, there were only 2 of them that actually managed to survive. So the vast majority of these cubs that are smuggled into the Middle East don't survive. But those that do survive sell for a massive amounts of money. And that's why this trade continues. And this is something that we all need to fight, is the relocation of wild cheetah into captive conditions. We know that this is not a good thing, because we know what humans did to the wolf. It took us just 15,000 years to turn wild functional wolf into all of the breeds of domestic dog. The same happened with the African wildcat, which was domesticated in Egypt 10,000 years ago, converted into all of these breeds of domestic cat. We certainly don't want to see the cheetah going the same way, but we can already see aggressive selection for color morphs in the captive community, where there's aggressive selection for spotless cheetah and there's aggressive selection for king cheetah, which results in a lot of inbreeding. And this is not what we want from conservation. We want to see a wild functional cheetah. We want to see cheetah doing what they've been doing for millions of years, and that is avoiding lion, avoiding leopard, and doing what cheetah have been doing for millions of years. I thought I would just include a couple of slides on some of our more famous cheetah. This is the Darlington male. We relocated him over 300 kilometers from Samara Game Reserve to Gondwana Game Reserve, and it was very interesting. He escaped from his boma and walked all the way back to where he came from. A very interesting cheetah. Before he died, he gave us 3 cubs, which are still alive and well in the Metapopulation. And this is a female called Kitswiri. She lived on a reserve called Karongwe. Very tough place to be a cheetah. There were 24 leopards on that property, and a whole lot of lion and a whole lot of spotted hyena. Of the 19 cubs that she gave birth to, only 2 survived until adulthood. She was eventually killed by a lion, unfortunately, and her 2 remaining cubs, we managed to capture them after the lion killed Kitswiri, and we relocated them to the Karongwe Boma. And lion have an inherent hatred for cheetah and other cats. They actively want to pursue and kill cheetah, and they visited these two cubs every day in the boma. And some of the lion cubs actually broke into the boma. And this is footage of one of her cubs that unfortunately died of stress from these lions visiting these cubs every day. So what happens is the lion don't actually catch and kill the cheetah, but they just stress them to death. There's a buildup of lactic acid in the body, and they die of something called capture myopathy. The little female, however, survived, and she was released from the boma, and half an hour after we released her, she captured a bushbuck and did very well on Karongwe, and some of her offspring are still alive in the Metapopulation today. So this is one of our cheetah that was on a reserve where there were no lion and leopard and hyena, and she gave birth to 19 offspring, of which 18 survived to adulthood. And her genetics are throughout the Metapopulation today. And I eventually had to go to this reserve called Samara to capture some of her offspring because there were so many. And so I thought I'd just include some notes on how to catch a wild cheetah. So you've got to look for their scent marking posts or their play trees. This is areas that the cheetahs frequently visit to mark their territory, and they scratch the sides of these trees and do their thing at the base of the tree. Very easy to find these play trees. Then you bring out your capture cages and you place them around the play tree in such a way that the only way that the cheetah can access his play tree is by going through the trap. And then cheetah love the smell of Calvin Klein, specifically Obsession for Men. This was figured out by a zoo in Chicago in the States. So you spray the tree and the trap with the Calvin Klein, and then you lure your cheetah into the traps. And yeah, it works very well. You generally catch one cheetah every 3 months with these cage traps. In some cases, it's very difficult to identify where the play tree is because, you know, there are so many trees on some of our reserves. And in these cases, you know, you can use camera traps to see where the cheetah are walking. They often pace the fences of the reserves. And then you can see these cheetah were actually moving under the fences. So we placed the traps at that exact point, and we caught 4 cheetah in one day. It was a huge success. And obviously, you don't want the cheetah to stay in those traps for too long. So you immediately have to drive them to the new reserves where you are relocating them to. In some cases, we've captured some really big, strong cheetah that have managed to bash their way out of the traps. So this was a very frustrating exercise for us. So we had to strengthen our traps. But interestingly, cheetah are not very clever. We caught that same cheetah in the same trap 1 week later. So yes, I thought I'd just end off the presentation by sharing some notes with you on how cheetah fit into the cat family. Which cats are they more closely related to? So cats are very interesting from an evolutionary perspective. They evolved in Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Cambodia, that part of the world 11 million years ago. And that's where they split from their closest relatives, the Linzangs. Not a very successful group of animals. There's only 2 species of Linzang, but there are 41 species of cat today that occupy 6 continents on the surface of the earth. And cat evolution is characterized by several migrations to new continents as sea levels rose and fell. And the first to branch off were the roaring cats, the biggest cats. And this includes clouded leopards, which are in fact the most primitive living cat. It's very interesting that jaguars are more closely related to lions than they are to leopards, and snow leopards are more closely related to tigers than they are to any other cats. So these were the first cats to evolve, and they were followed by the bay cats. There's 3 species of bay cat which are found in Asia. And the first cats to move into Africa were the Caracals. There's 3 species of Caracal, well, the Caracal taxonomic group that includes servals, the golden cat, which is found up near the Congo, and Caracals. These were the first cats in Africa. And then about between 6 and 11 million years ago, when sea levels were very low, cats moved into the Americas. They crossed the Beringian land bridge between Russia and Alaska. And this included the ocelots, beautiful cats. There's about 7 species. The lynxes, also a very interesting cats, 4 species of lynx today. And the Puma lineage. It's very interesting that the closest living relative of the cheetah is actually the puma. So a lot of people won't believe it, but cheetahs actually evolved in North America. And we know this because of the fossil record, which has revealed that there were 2 different species of cheetah that evolved, that lived in North America and had a very puma-like appearance. It's very interesting that the speeds attained by the 2nd fastest land mammal are thought to have evolved in response to predation by the North American cheetah. So this is the pronghorn, the 2nd fastest land mammal on Earth. It can run up to 96 kilometers an hour. So we don't know why cheetahs went extinct in North America, but we know that before they went extinct, they recrossed the Beringian land bridge. Some of the lynxes did the same thing when sea levels were low again 3 million years ago. And the largest cheetah that ever lived was the giant Eurasian cheetah, which is about the size of a female lion, 120 kilograms. Not as fast as the modern day cheetah, zoologists believe, but definitely much larger. The modern day cheetah weighs only about 50 kilograms. And we've got no idea how cheetahs crossed into Africa, but we definitely do know that there were 3 crossing points that they could have utilized. And yeah, today cheetah are pretty much almost entirely confined to the continent of Africa. So yes, there are a lot of interesting conservation work to look forward to. This was our first international relocation, the relocation of 4 cheetah to Malawi in 2017. If you look at a place like Malawi, when you fly over Africa today, you know, you very quickly realize that long gone are the wide open spaces. You know, there's only tiny little fragments of natural habitat left for cheetah. And that's why we have to use this metapopulation approach for cheetah conservation, because cheetah can no longer traverse the human-dominated landscape. This is a photograph I took of Lowveld National Park as we were flying the cheetahs in. You can very clearly see where the fence line of the reserve is. You know, on the right-hand side of the fence is natural habitat. On the left-hand side of the fence is complete human destruction of the landscape. So animals like the cheetah, elephant, lion, buffalo, rhino can no longer move through that landscape. So we have to do the moving for them to ensure that they remain genetically healthy. This was the first wild cheetah reintroduced into Malawi, where cheetah went extinct in the 1980s, and they've done very well post-release. And very interesting following these cheetah after they were released. You know, the prey species in Malawi hadn't seen a large predator, a large cat, in over 30 years. So, you know, you could see they didn't see these cheetahs as dangerous. And the baboon, interestingly, were actually sleeping on the ground at night because they hadn't seen a leopard for so long. But obviously things changed with the reintroduction of cheetah in 2017, and then later in 2018, lions were brought into Malawi, into Lowveld National Park, Malawi. These are the first cubs born in Malawi. They've done very well, and these cubs are now adults and are also producing cubs of their own. And we hope to establish a small metapopulation cluster up in Malawi. And after our successes in Malawi, working with African parks, we hope to reintroduce cheetahs into other parts of Malawi. We've already put them into Majeti, and we hope to move them into Zambia in future, and possibly into Mozambique as well. Interestingly, we managed to find a reintroduction site in Mozambique, working with the Car Foundation and Gorongosa National Park, ANAC, the Mozambican Conservation Authorities. We reintroduced two packs of wild dogs there, and today there are more than 50 wild dogs in Gorongosa. So lots of potential to do really great conservation work in other parts of Africa. This is a place called Bangwelu in Zambia, where we hope to reintroduce in future. There's 50,000 black lechwe antelope there, and no cheetah to eat them. So lots of great, exciting work to come there. Mozambique, we have 5 reintroduction sites. We hope to start reintroducing there next year. Karongwe, Maputo Special Reserves, Inave National Park, Maromeo, and hopefully Gorongosa in future. So lots of exciting stuff to look forward to. And I really hope you enjoyed the presentation. Once again, a very big thank you to our sponsors. Of course, this work wouldn't be possible without you. I'm going to see now if we can answer some of the questions that you may have asked. I'm just quickly going to speak to our IT department to see how I can access these questions. I think I have to finish the presentation, and then hopefully we can access these questions. Please excuse me. Okay, escape key. All right. Here we go. Thanks very much to Rivash, one of our long-term supporters, for his question about preserving genetic diversity. Yes, so Pilanesberg National Park, that's a very valid question. 2 male cheetah moved on to Pilanesberg in 2012, and a female was brought in 2014, and the population took off. So obviously we had to bring in some new genetics because all of those cheetah were related to each other. It was mother, father, and offspring. So we brought 2 new males in 2018, and these males have done very well. We've also removed some cheetah. I think we've removed about 6 cheetah off of Pilanesberg in the last couple of years. And I think in the next 5 months, we're going to remove another 7 cheetah from Pilanesberg. So cheetah doing very well there. So we're going to make sure that, we keep the genetics healthy on a fenced reserve like Pilanesberg. A very interesting question here by Ariza Joseph. What's happening to the cheetah on Ritvlei? I've got some very exciting news to share with you, Riza. We'll be reintroducing cheetah onto Ritvlei at the end of August in 2 months' time. So it'll be great to have cheetah back on Ritvlei. And if you private message me, maybe yourself and Rivash can join for that reintroduction. Let's have a look here. So what do we have DNA for every individual in the metapopulation? We've got DNA for about 25% of our cheetah. Thanks for that question, Penny. It's very difficult to capture all of our cheetah. Some of our reserves are very big, 1,000 kilometers squared, or some of them are over 100,000 hectares. So it's very difficult to capture and get DNA from all of these cheetahs. So we have DNA from about 25% of them. And the information that we get from these genetic analyses is that our cheetah definitely are very healthy. A good question here, is there strong will in Africa to restore ecosystems? Definitely. We're seeing a lot of political stability returning to many countries in Africa, for example, Mozambique, Angola, West Africa, still a little bit of instability, but even there we're starting to see reserves getting patched up, fixed up. And so this is giving us opportunities to reintroduce cheetahs. And there's organizations like the Car Foundation, African Parks, Peace Parks, doing wonderful work in these countries, restoring ecological functionality to these national parks that have been neglected for decades. And this means that we can bring cheetah back. A question by Gail. Cheetah in the Free State. Cheetah were wiped out in the Free State in the late 1800s. We reintroduced them there in 2000. I think it was the year Mandela died. I remember just 1 week after Mandela died, we reintroduced cheetah there, and they've done incredibly well. We now have 2 reserves in the Free State, and we recently we've been removing some cheetah from those reserves for relocation to other parts of the country. Thanks very much for your comment, Iris. The free roaming populations in Southern Africa are mainly on the northern border of South Africa, also Botswana and Namibia, and there's a very small free roaming population in Zambia of about 80 cheetah. With regards to the confiscated cubs, we're really trying our best to get them to South Africa for rewilding, and then we want to use them for reintroduction into reserves in East Africa. And we've been in communication with a number of reserves in East Africa, and we're really trying our best to get them back into the wild. At the moment, we've managed to sign an agreement with the Somali government to bring them to South Africa, and we're just waiting for permission from Dr. Laurie Marker to bring them to South Africa for rewilding. So we're just waiting for that final confirmation from Laurie Marker from the Cheetah Conservation Foundation in Namibia. Let's have a look here. Another question by Sam. Yes, that's a very valid point that you make there. Cheetah evolved in cold conditions, and for this reason, they are able to survive temperatures of up to -10 degrees Celsius, because all those thousands of years living in Europe and Asia, they definitely are, their physiology is made to survive in cold environments. I'm just having a look at these last 2 questions. Let's have a look. I think I may have answered them all. Please excuse me if I did miss any. I think the last one that I missed was from Eleanor. How many cheetah from De Wild are introduced into the metapopulation every year? So De Wild have been great. They've given us about 3 to 5 cheetah every year for reintroduction. And some of these cheetah have done exceptionally well. For example, one female on Madikwe Game Reserve that recently gave birth to cubs. And yes, yeah, we're hoping to get more cheetahs from De Wild in future for our reintroduction efforts. So that should cover all of the questions. Please excuse me if I missed some. A big thank you for joining the talk, and thoroughly hope you enjoyed the presentation.